Hello, I am Bianca Benedetti-Fang from UBS Wealth Management USA's Business Owner Client segment. Welcome to Founders and Funders, our conversation series with women entrepreneurs focusing on how they built, exited, and supported successful businesses. To catch all the episodes, please subscribe to the Founders and Funders playlist on UBS's YouTube channel. This month, we are pleased to welcome Medina Jett to the program. Medina is a female founder who has transcended barriers and mastered the corporate and business game. I was introduced to Medina when she was featured in UBS Flight Paths, a report we put together highlighting the journeys of successful entrepreneurs who sold multi-million-dollar companies and then asked themselves, what's next? In this amazing paper, available now at ubs.com/flightpaths, Medina details her unique perspective as a Black woman rising in corporate America in male-dominated industries, including law and finance, before she made the decision to launch Integrated Compliance Solutions Group, making her the only African-American woman in the world to own an asset management compliance firm. After 12 years, Medina joined an exclusive group of Black women who have led their companies through successful acquisition when she sold ICS Group. Medina founded and currently runs Jett Speaks to share strategies and unwritten corporate rules that female entrepreneurs need to increase their value and excel in their careers. Medina, what an impressive career, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Bianca.
Medina, I would love to dive in and start a little bit by talking about your journey. As an entrepreneur, in a way, I feel like you're a pioneer. And I think in your life, there were a lot of firsts, right? Youngest SVP, the first female, the only Black executive at companies. And I think it can be daunting to navigate uncharted territory. So, what are some things that you learned that may help other women who are watching and find themselves in a similar position as the first?
Sure. Thanks for that question. As I think back to my very first senior executive role, the thing that made it so much easier for me is knowing that I had sponsors and supporters within my organization. I was recruited for my first SVP role by the president of Cigna Retirement and Investment Services. And fortunately for me, by the time I arrived at the company, he had talked me up so much that there was very little that I had to do in terms of proving my credibility and being and having to justify why I was there, which is what I feel like a lot of Black women in positions like that are forced to do. And so I would say one of the greatest learnings which I brought into that role is to make sure that you have sponsors and advocates within the organization so you don't always have to toot your own horn and that there are other people doing that for you, which makes it so much easier to come into an organization and really get to work and do what you're there to do, as opposed to having to worry about whether people believe in you or know why you're there, and they can support you, and it makes it so much easier to get things done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I absolutely agree. I think mentorship is so important. And certainly having an advocate and a sponsor can make all the difference. But after years in corporate America, you had an urge to start your own company. So, what inspired that?
So I always thought that I would start my own company eventually. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My dad had his own security alarm business. I had an uncle who ran the local cleaners in my neighborhood. Another uncle was the neighborhood dentist. And so I grew up realizing that the path to true financial freedom was entrepreneurship and business ownership. But I got out of law school and I joined corporate America, and I did played the game that everyone plays and tried to, work hard and work my way up the corporate ladder. But at some point, I always knew that I would have enough knowledge and experience under my belt to finally leave. And that time came in 2008 after I completed the executive MBA program at the University of Connecticut and decided now is the time. It's time for me to branch out, take all the experience and learnings that I've gained at that point to really, try my shot at running my own business. And it just so happened that that was at the very beginning of the Great Recession. And so timing could have been a little better, but it's one of those things where I always knew it was something that I had to do, and once I really felt like this is the time, I had to just jump off that proverbial cliff and see if I could make a go of it.
That's amazing. And I will say I was always so impressed because as you built your company, I think you mentioned in the report it was really important for you to walk the walk. And in 2008, as you were building your company, you very intentionally assembled a diverse staff. I'm sure many of the entrepreneurs watching today are probably dealing with, not uh, they're dealing with the great resignation, and would love to know how did you make diversity, equity, and inclusion a key part of the ICS culture, and what were the results of
Yeah. So important for me when I started ICS Group was to really highlight the fact that there are talented people of color in the financial services industry. And a lot of people didn't realize that. And so when they would retain ICS Group to handle their compliance and operations work, and I'd show up with different people on my team, they were always surprised that I had assembled a team as diverse as I had. And I think a lot of what went into that is just recognizing what I wanted and what I needed when I was in a corporate role and bringing that same type of culture to my own company. And so that was the time then where I had the ability to create the type of culture that I wanted. And it's easy when you're building a company from the ground up because it's so much easier to start with the right culture and build upon that as opposed to going into a corporate role and trying to redo or revamp the culture, which is what I tended to have to do in the past. And so a lot of things I did at ICS Group was really try to one is respect the individual as an individual. There was no one size fits all. Everybody I had a different relationship with. Everybody I got to know them on a personal level and really tried to respect where they were. I had one employee who had four children and was pregnant with the fifth when she came to work for us. Okay. And she was in law school. And so being able to appreciate the value that she brought, but yet be flexible enough to allow her some work-life balance was really important. There were other folks with other challenges, but I always made it really key to our culture to make sure that they all knew the value of having a diverse team and what they each individually brought to that overall company and business model. And it ended up helping not only ICS Group, but it helped our clients as well, where they could have someone from ICS Group sit at that table and share our diverse perspectives, not only from our expertise, but just from the fact that we're all different people and we bring a different point of view that could add value to our clients. And so I think for me, that was just beautiful seeing that all come to fruition. And all of my employees loved the fact that they could finally be recognized for the individuals that they were and still know that they were bringing value. So it was a great situation.
Yes, and so full circle, right? To
Yeah,
be on, the receiving side of advocacy and mentorship and sponsorship, and then be able to integrate that into your culture at the office.
exactly.
That's fantastic.
Exactly.
So in November of 2020, you sold ICS to Foresight Financial. And as we addressed in the Flight Pass report, an exit is an important, it's a super challenging decision. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about your thought process on exiting ICS?
Yeah. So there were a lot of things going on around that time frame. So for the past 6 years, my older sister had been suffering or battling ovarian cancer. So a lot of my time and effort had been going into caring for her, not only financially, but trying to be present. Another thing I'd always kept in the back of my mind, and one of my life goals was to retire when I turned 55. And so that was something that part of the reason when I was building ICS Group, it was like, okay, I'm going to turn 55 eventually, and I want to be able to retire. And as most people think, go lay out on the beach, or that was my plan, back then. So when all this was happening, and I was trying to care for my sister, out of the blue, I get a call from Foresight several months after my 55th birthday saying, have you ever considered selling your company? And it was right at that time where I was feeling like, okay, it's great that I'm able to help my sister experimental treatments and helping her travel to different cancer centers, but I didn't feel like I was there enough because I was so busy running my company. So when Foresight approached me, it just felt like the stars were all aligning in terms of this is the right time. This is the time to exit. I put a ton of work into it. It was over a decade's worth of blood, sweat, and tears. And it was time for me to switch my priorities and focus on my sister for a change. And so when I sold ICS Group, that allowed me all the time in the world to really spend time with her. And I became her primary caregiver. And she died a couple of months ago. And so the timing of it all, I think, was certainly for a reason. And it was the best decision that I ever made to finally put aside working, and really focus on family, family, family for a change. And so having done that, now I'm saying, okay, phew, what do I really want to do with this next phase of my life now that I've done what I needed to do in that regard?
That is so powerful. And, as you're saying, it's so great that the timing worked out, that you were really able to focus on the things that were so important to you.
Yeah.
And, so much of the Flight Pass report really focuses on life after a sale. And, your sale was actually pretty recent, so you probably have a pretty fresh perspective. As you said, many entrepreneurs dream of taking time off on a beach, just relaxing. Has that been your experience?
I think most people do look forward to relaxing. I mean, starting and scaling a business is not easy. It's one of those things that can really take over your entire life for years and years and years. And when I would be, sitting by my sister's side and she'd be, telling me, go get me this, go get me that. I was thinking, I bet there's no other entrepreneur whose post acquisition looks like this. you know but it's one of those things where it was just what I had to do at the time. And now I feel like I finally have time to take a breather, relax on the beach. I gifted myself for Christmas one vacation every month for this entire 2022, and I've been trying to make good on that. So yeah, I was skiing in Aspen last month, and the month before that, I was in the Dominican Republic, and I think I'm going to Lisbon in March. So we'll see. I'm gonna finally take time for myself, and then start to figure out what's next. But for now, I want to just enjoy myself for a while.
That's amazing. And we absolutely cannot wait to hear about all of your next steps. And I'm sure the fantastic impact that I can imagine that you will have from here.
Yeah, it should be pretty exciting. And even though I'm focusing on myself, I'm still working Jet Speaks, I'm still coaching, I'm still speaking, but I just find that there's so many hours in a day. There's so many things that can be done. And so, I always encourage people, don't think linear in terms of what you do. There's so many different things that people can do that all tie into either their experience, their knowledge, or their passions.
Always such good advice. Medina, I have to say thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. And as I mentioned, you can find Medina's story and the story of other successful entrepreneurs who sold businesses and then moved on to their successful next chapters in our UBS Flight Pass report. We have video interviews and lessons, advice, and musings from many of our featured entrepreneurs at www.ubs.com/flightpaths. Thank you again for joining us for our latest episode of Founders and Funders. Don't forget, for additional episodes covering insights from female founders, you can save the Founders and Funders playlist automatically right here on UBS's YouTube channel. I encourage you to speak with a UBS financial advisor to learn more about UBS resources on financial planning and wealth building, as well as our latest resources to support women and business owners by visiting ubs.com/women and ubs.com/business services. Thank you again for placing your trust with UBS and your financial advisor teams.